January 27th of 1959, 9 experienced hikers walked into the northern Ural Mountains. 26 days later, all 9 were dead. Their tent was found cut open from the inside. They had fled into the dark forest in temperatures of -30 degrees Celsius. Most were barefoot. None had time to grab their warm clothes. Some of them had injuries that no avalanche or fall can fully explain. The official Soviet investigation closed the case with the phrase compelling natural force. And then they sealed the file for 30 years. This is the story of what happened at Dyatlov Pass. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov. He was 23 years old, a 5th-year student of radio engineering at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. All 9 members of the group were students or recent graduates of the same institute. They were experienced. Most had been on multiple winter expeditions of this difficulty. This expedition was rated Category 3, the highest level in the Soviet sports classification. The goal was to reach Mount Otorten, a peak in the northern Urals, roughly 500 kilometers north of Sverdlovsk. Otorten in the local Mansi language is sometimes translated as "do not go there." The group departed Sverdlovsk on January 23rd. They took a train, then a truck, then a logging sledge. On January 27th, they began the ski portion of the expedition. They were due to return to Sverdlovsk on February 12th. On the morning of January 28th, one member of the group turned back. His name was Yuri Yudin. He had joint pain that made the trek impossible. He hugged his friends goodbye. He never saw any of them again. He would be the only survivor of the Dyatlov group. The remaining 9 continued north. On the night of February 1st, they made camp on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. In the Mansi language, Kholat Syakhl means mountain of the dead. This is what their journal entries from the day record. They mention severe wind, limited visibility, a decision to camp on the slope rather than below the tree line. This decision is one of the few things that experienced mountaineers later considered unusual. It would have been safer to descend a kilometer to the forest, but there was wind and dwindling daylight, so they pitched the tent on the slope. The last frames on their cameras are from the evening of February 1st. They show the inside of the tent, they show the group preparing food, smoking, smiling, writing in journals. They show no sign of distress, they show no sign of imminent danger. And then, sometime in the next few hours, something happened. Whatever it was, it caused all 9 people to slice their way out of the tent from the inside. They left their boots, they left their warm coats, they left the food they had been preparing, they left their flashlights. They walked or ran approximately 1.5 kilometers downhill toward the forest. Many of them were in only their socks, some were barefoot. Outside, the temperature was at least -25 degrees Celsius, with wind considerably lower. By February 12th, the date they were due back in Sverdlovsk, the group had not arrived. Some delay was normal. Soviet expedition schedules were rarely precise. But by February 20th, when no telegram had arrived, the Institute notified families. A search and rescue operation was launched. Volunteer students and soldiers from local units joined the search. The terrain was vast, 200 square kilometers of snow and forest. On February 26th, a helicopter spotted something on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. It was the canvas tent, half buried in snow. The rescuers approached. What they found, they immediately recognized as deeply abnormal. The tent was empty, the food was still inside, the boots were still inside, and the canvas wall had been cut from the inside in 3 places. The rescuers followed footprints down the slope toward the forest. The footprints continued for over 1 kilometer. Most of the prints were not made by boots, they were made by people in socks or barefoot. Near the edge of the forest, the rescuers found the remains of a small fire. Beside the fire, they found 2 members of the group. Both had died of hypothermia. 3 more bodies were found on the slope between the fire and the tent. It appeared they had been trying to return. All 3 also showed signs of hypothermia. This was a tragic outcome. 5 people had died of cold trying to flee the tent. But the case was not closed. 4 members of the group were still missing. It took 2 more months to find them. They were found in May when spring thaw revealed a small ravine. The ravine was approximately 75 meters from the location of the fire. The 4 bodies were beneath roughly 4 meters of snow. Their clothing was different from the first 5. They had taken clothes from the first to die and put them on. It was an act of cold desperation, of trying to survive. But their injuries were not from cold. 2 of the 4 had severe chest fractures, comparable to those caused by a high-speed car accident or a heavy fall, but with no external bruising or visible damage to their skin. The lead investigator wrote, "The force required must have been considerable." This created a problem. There was no avalanche evidence at the tent, no debris, no broken trees, no buried equipment. There was no struggle in the tent, no defensive wounds. And yet the canvas had been cut from the inside, and 4 people had injuries that snow does not cause. The official investigation, completed in May of 1959, used a phrase, "compelling natural force." They did not name what that force was. The case was closed. The file was classified. In the following decades, theories accumulated. Avalanche, wind slab, infrasound from atmospheric conditions, Mansi attack, Soviet weapons test, and those who preferred the supernatural, paradoxical undressing, Yeti, aliens. None of the theories fit all the evidence cleanly. In 2019, the Russian prosecutor general reopened the case. They re-examined the physical evidence using contemporary methods: snow mechanics, avalanche modeling, slope analysis. In 2020, they published a conclusion: a small slab avalanche triggered by the position of their tent on a steep slope, possibly delayed for hours after the tent was pitched, as snow accumulated above. When it released, it would have hit the upper section of the tent with great force. This would explain the chest fractures without external bruising. It would explain why they cut the tent from inside. It would explain why they fled in panic without time to dress. The 2020 investigation concluded that what happened next was a tragic chain of error. In the dark, in the cold, disoriented, they could not find the tent again. They tried to build a fire. They tried to dig snow shelters. They tried to return. Cold killed 5 of them, and the 4 who reached the small ravine were killed by injuries from the original avalanche. It is the best evidence-based explanation we have. It is not, in the view of every researcher, a complete one. Some questions remain unresolved. Why did they camp on the slope when the forest was so close? Why did experienced hikers cut their tent rather than open the entrance? Why were some of the bodies found with discoloration that the avalanche cannot explain? The Russian investigators in 2020 acknowledged this. We have an explanation. We do not have every answer. The Dyatlov Pass is now a recognized landmark. There is a monument near the original campsite. It lists the names of the 9: Igor Dyatlov, Yuri Doroshenko, Lyudmila Dubinina, Yuri Krivonishenko, Alexander Kolevatov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov. They walked into the mountains together, 9 experienced hikers, in February of 1959. What happened on the night of February 1st is now mostly understood, but mostly is not entirely. 65 years later, the snow on Kholat Syakhl still keeps some of what it knows.